Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So last weekend I was off-roading with my buggy, and I lost oil pressure in the engine. I was on the obstacle that I just showed at the beginning of this clip, and as you can see, I backed off because I noticed something was wrong. I do have an oil pressure red light that comes on my dash if I don't notice the gauge. I do have odometer gauges, and as I was revving the engine to go up the obstacle, I did notice that the light was on, so I feared something was odd. So I drove back down the obstacle, and then I drove to the end of the trail. We weren't very far away from camp, and I basically positioned the buggy so that somebody can tow me backwards. The reason why I get towed backwards because obviously I can't run the engine with zero oil pressure. So I have on my buggy, and that's one of the advantages of having an electric rear steer. Electric hydraulic power pack for the rear steer is that I can operate the rear wheels on battery power only, which is great. This is the second time that this saves me. The only problem is I have to look back as somebody's towing me back to camp, and my neck was sore, but that's a very minor inconvenience. Instead of having to wrestle the steering wheel, not being able to turn with no engine power at all, the front wheels would be really difficult to turn. But if the front wheels are tracking back, it's really easy for me. Even if they turn left to right, I can adjust with the rear steer as I'm being pulled backward. And we pulled approximately 3 kilometers, or about 2 miles, back to camp through some really twisty areas, and I was able to turn pretty good. So that's a big advantage of having the power pack. So once we got back to camp, some friends suggested maybe the pickup tube was broken, because we turned on the engine for probably 10-15 seconds. We didn't hear any knocking, and I didn't hear any knocking or weird noises coming from the engine while I was on the obstacle. It was just only an oil pressure loss from the engine. And the engine in this buggy, if you have not seen the other videos, it's a 545 cubic inch. It's a 460 base stroker, making approximately 550 horsepower. So I built this engine back in 2012, so that's 10 years ago. So I haven't had any problems with it since. So essentially, we added, when we got back to camp, we added 5 liters of engine oil, because we thought maybe the pickup tube was broken. So even at that, we turned it on as I loaded into the trailer for another 10-15 seconds, and still no oil pressure at all. So we figured, something else is wrong. Brought it back home, and the next day, I took it out of the trailer and put it in the garage. That took me probably 20-30 seconds having the engine on. And I started thinking, okay, what am I gonna do? So the first thing that I did, I basically emptied the oil from the engine. I wanted to make sure there was no chunks or anything like that in the oil, or metal flakes or metal parts, and the engine oil was clean. I left it overnight sit, and I didn't see anything float to the surface. There was a lot of oil. I normally put about 10 liters of oil. That's about 10 quarts, and we added another 5 liters or 5 quarts. So there was a lot of oil, but there was nothing in the oil. And the second thing that I've done is basically I took the oil filter, I cut it open, I spread the filtering element to look. It's a K&N oil filter, and I didn't see any metal parts or anything major in the inside of the oil filter. So I figured there wasn't any major problem with the engine yet. Still, I haven't solved the problem. And then I thought about it some more, and I figured, maybe I should pull a distributor and try to turn the oil pump with a drill to see if it builds any pressure. So I did that. And I added fresh oil to the engine, and then I tried to turn it, and then it made about 15 psi of engine pressure. So I do have two different gauges. I have the odometer electric gauge, which reads the pressure at the end of the oil path in the engine, so to the back of the block. And I do have also an accumulator that has a pressure gauge on it that I can read. So I was reading off and the accumulator connects right to the middle of the path of oil through the engine, so approximately at the front of the engine. And then I got 15 psi as I turning the drill, which was really surprising to me because it's you either have oil pressure or you don't. So I didn't know what was going on here. So I talked to some of my friends, and then they suggested that I need to remove the pan and inspect. So the problem with the pan is that I have an engine cradle and I need to pull the whole engine. So some of my friends convinced me, well, how about you just cut off the cradle for the engine and just pull the pan from the bottom. This saves you from having to remove the engine. So I figured, okay, that's not a problem. I'll do that. It wasn't that bad of a deal. It took me approximately 15-20 minutes to cut it off with the plasma and the grinder. And pulled it off, removed the oil pan, and then as I look, I see the oil pump that is basically housing the oil housing, or the casting for the oil pump, was broken completely in half, and it was being held in place by the aftermarket pickup tube that I bought with the oil pan that I'm gonna show you in a second. I have it all open here. So essentially, so there were two items that were holding the pump in place: the drive shaft that comes from the top, and then that bolt, the pickup tube, which is bolted to one of the main bearing caps, which is crazy. And that was still making 15 psi of pressure. And I pulled the valve covers off the motor when I was priming the engine before I removed the oil container or the oil pan. I could see oil flowing all the way to the top of the engine with the drill. So even while the casting was broke completely off the oil pump, it was still getting oil to the top of the engine, which is crazy. This is really, I got really lucky on this. So the old oil pump is a Melling high volume oil pump for a big block Ford, which are quite common. And I did check all the top of the engine as well to make sure that nothing was bent or broken. I did a compression test as well in the engine to make sure that the camshaft is still good. This is before I empty the oil. Obviously, I did that, and the compression test all passed. Yeah, so other than that, it was all fine, except I did inspect the whole entire bottom of the engine, and there was nothing wrong with it that I could see from the bearings. So essentially, I did order a Jon Kaase racing oil pump, and apparently it's built out of aluminum. I still haven't received it. I'm going to receive it today, and it's built out of aluminum. And it's supposedly it has very strong feet that connects to the block itself, so it's not prone to breakage. Okay, so this is the old oil pump. It's the one made by Melling, and as you can see, this is where it attaches to the block, and it's completely broken off, completely. It was a clean break. There was nothing, no chunks or anything like that were left in the engine. And this is the big pickup tube. So the pickup tube actually connects right here. Sorry, like this. And essentially this is what saved the engine from total destruction. So this is a really nice pickup tube. It was built by Armando Oil Pans from Texas. And this is the oil pan that I bought from him in 2012. As you can see, it's built by AR Oil Pan. I'm gonna give a shout out to him because of all the nice work that he's done. So This is the oil pan. So first of all, this is a custom-built oil pan that I had originally designed because at the first iteration of the engine, when I had it in another buggy, I had the exhaust coming from behind the engine. So this is the back of the engine, this is the front. And I do have room, so I wanted to add as much capacity as possible. This is a dipstick, custom dipstick. So this is what's cool inside it. So first of all, there's a sump in it with trapdoors that he built. So 1, 2, 3, and then there's 4. And this is a sump area, so the engine doesn't start from oil. There's one crank scraper right here, and there's the shield or the windage tray that goes on the top. It goes right on the top here. So the windage, and I have to bolt it in place. So essentially, the windage tray, what it does is it keeps the oil from sloshing up to the crankshaft. And there's also still crank scrapers here. So there's 3 total. Extremely well built. He did a really good job. Really happy with it. It wasn't cheap, but it's custom. So he built it exactly to my specifications. So this is a really nice oil pan. Okay, so this is the oil pan with the windage tray installed. Now let's take a look here. So I checked the rockers, all of them, they're all good. And the push rods are fine too. In the bottom of the engine, I checked the rods, all the bearings. I didn't pull any of the caps, but I just did a visual inspection. I could see the camshaft lobes from underneath as well, and the lifters, the timing chain. It's all, everything looks good. So I'm just gonna clean it all up and get it ready for installation of the oil pan. All right, so I got the new Kaase oil pump. This is the pickup, and this is a comparison between the stock pump and the Jon Kaase pump. It's very, very beefy, and it's made out of aluminum. Seems about the same. It seems a little bit deeper, and it came with ARP studs. Here it is. I think the oiling hole might be a little bit smaller than this one, but they said that this is a high pressure pump. It is significantly lighter too. I'd say probably twice as light as the other one because it's built out of aluminum. Okay, so this is the oil pump and pickup installed. As you can see, the oil pump drive shaft is right over here. This is where the pickup is held. So I put Loctite on this bolt, on these 2 bolts. Make sure to put the gaskets with nothing in them, and then the ARP studs for the oil pump. Basically screw in the stud first. I also used Loctite on the top and the bottom, and you're supposed to torque them to 65 foot-pounds, but the problem is I can't get a torque wrench in there. So the trick here is to use 2 box wrenches. And you put them like right the front and on one at the end of the other like this, and then just give it a good tug to approximately 50 foot-pounds, 50-60 foot-pounds. And gotta make sure that there's enough play in the shaft up and down, and that little clip up top is held so when you pull the distributor the shaft doesn't fall in. I also check clearances with the stroker, make sure it's all good, but it seems like it's all good. So because I rotated it 1 degree, 1 full rotation, and nothing was hitting. and then essentially what's left is to drop the distributor. So the oil pan is now installed, and this is the first time I installed the oil pan on this engine from the bottom. I had bought a Ford Motorsports reusable one-piece pan gasket, and the first time we tried to install it, I put silicone on the edges right here, underneath, obviously, one here, one on the other side, and two in the back, just a little dabs of silicone, and put it up in place, retorqued everything, and filled the engine with oil, and it was leaking from the back. So the lip wasn't in the groove, was crooked at the back of the engine, this lip right here. So I had to take it all off again, and then I had to try to get creative. I had to get my son and wife to help me hold the gasket in place while I put the pan up from underneath, and that seemed to be that worked. So I just need to start the engine now and just check everything's okay. All right, so day 2 of working on the buggy and the oil pan, changing the oil pump. So I did, the good news is I did get it started, and it's running fine now. Good oil pressure. However, it was a very difficult day today, to say the least. So it started up by this morning. Woke up early, and I decided I'm going to make the bottom engine cradle to make it removable. So I want to add a few tabs, etc., and I wanted to make it strong too, because it could get hit from the bottom. So what I decided to do is basically work on it, and I worked on it for like 2 or 3 hours until 11 o'clock. I haven't started the buggy yet by that time. I didn't want to start it too early in the morning and wake up the neighbors. So around 10:30, 11 in the morning, I said, okay, it's time to start it up. So I went to start the buggy, and it didn't start, and then it backfired really loudly from the exhaust. I'm like, okay, what did I do wrong? So I'm not an engine builder. I built this engine 10 years ago, and reading through the manual and researching every step to make sure I didn't miss anything. So the problem is I basically forgot that I need to put I need to turn the crank on the engine to make sure that cylinder number 1 is on the compression stroke, and it was not on the compression stroke. I just put it to TDC. I forgot about that. So the distributor was 180 degrees offset, so that's why it didn't start. But I got scared a little bit. I thought something was wrong on the engine, so I took my tool in order to turn the oil pump from the distributor. I do have an electric drill and an attachment that goes down into the distributor hole, and I could spin the oil pump and check oil pressure. So I did that. It ran good. So you have to remember that for Fords, the distributor turns counterclockwise. So I turned it, and I got 60 psi pressure, which is great. And then all of a sudden, something let go. It like poof, and it starts turning in the oil pressure. I'm like, oh my god, what's going on? So I look into the hole, and I see metal shavings inside the distributor hole, which got me scared. I thought I just ruined the engine. Anyways, so I ended up doing a compression test. It was all good. So what's going on here? And then pulled the oil pan, emptied the oil, pulled the oil pan again, and checked. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the oil. It was clean as a whistle. And so what ended up happening is that because I used an electric drill, once again, rookie mistake or newbie mistake. I haven't done this in a long time. Because it's spinning backwards, it's one of those, the electric drill has one of those chucks that you have to hand tighten, and because it was spinning backwards, it loosened up, and the tool that goes down into the distributor hole started, the drill chuck was turning onto the tool, and it was creating some metal shavings that started falling into the distributor hole. Anyways, that's fine. I decided it was only at the front a little bit, so I decided to flush it all out with a brake cleaner from the top and turn the engine many times and flush the front of the engine of all metal shavings, and then blew it with compressed air to make sure everything was clean. Reinstalled the tank, the oil pan, and fill it again with oil. Tried to start the buggy again, set the distributor on the right spot. It wasn't totally the right spot. It was off by one tooth again. I thought it was at TDC on the compression stroke and on cylinder number 1, but it wasn't. It was on it was offset a little bit off the 1 mark on the distributor housing. It started, but it wasn't running right, so I shut it off, removed the distributor again, and tried to position it again, and positioning it finally fell into the right spot. Turned it back on, and it ran perfectly fine after. I let it run for about 10-15 minutes, warmed up, and then continued working on the engine cradle. So it was an adventure today, but I guess this is what happens when you don't work on engines every day. You forget some steps, and engine work is really critical. So I needed to get some help also. My wife really helped me a lot today, and that's nice of her to do that, and my son also. So it's all good now. I just have to finish installing the engine cradle and be done with this project.